All right. Well, thank you all for being here. We've kind of we've been on a couple different kind of series we want to do with just the prevalence of AI and all that sort of stuff. We've kind of wanted to do a series about how we can integrate it more in some of the work that we're doing in Trio. So about 2 months ago, we had kind of done a session around using it for image generation and in like creativity and how we can use it for making flyers and just all the kind of creative elements that uh, AI and chat stuff like ChatGPT can do. But this is something I played around with last year when I was helping with the SSS programs in their grant writing efforts and in my role. I did the thing again where I skipped over. There's an introduction to me coming in a second. I used ChatGPT a bit and was working with some kind of grant foundations and grant organizations around how we can use some of these tools to kind of help in the grant writing process. So I was trying to just synthesize some of that stuff and put together something helpful that can hopefully make your processes easier if you are writing for grants in this upcoming cycle. You're going to be when it comes to kind of upper bound and make nair. So today we're looking at using ChatGPT to help support Trio grant writing from all the way from first draft to final reviews. I'm putting a caveat kind of out here right here and now that you do not like have to only use ChatGPT. This kind of applies to a lot of the different tools that are out there. If you're one of these Microsoft campuses and you have the Copilot, the hope is you can kind of use this all under the same umbrella. It's just using um, that kind of tool as a way to help in your processes. If people have questions at any point in time, please um, just come on mute, throw it in the chat. I'm not in my normal office here, but I'm doing my best to manage watching the chat, watching participants, and those sorts of things. My name is Matt Bezick, so I serve as the technology and communications representative on the NAEOP board. I'm also the executive director for Oregon Trio Association. Part of that role is helping support a lot of the programs and writing grants and new folks and writing for new grants. So this has definitely been something that I've played around with a lot and just wanted to learn about like how do we best implement this like great tool in a context for something that is like so overwhelmingly specific and technical when it comes to like writing Trio grants. Like, how can we integrate the two so we're not losing kind of the personal touches and the localized touches required in what ultimately is usually a successful Trio grant, but just making your life easier or like finding ways to use the tools available through this um, technology that just improves what you already are doing. So what I'm planning to do today is just kind of go over why you can use it and why I think you should and why it is important to use it. Some steps for getting started. I'm not going to assume that you've used necessarily ChatGPT or something similar previously and go over some of the basics. And then we're going to look at both all the way from drafting through editing and just reviewing, just like that entire, all the phases of doing Trio grant writing. And then just highlight a couple ways to just kind of utilize this technology in your entire workflow of kind of how you're going about writing Trio grants. There's gonna be a few times I'll actually pull it up and like show on screen some of the stuff we can do, but this really is something that's best done as like trial and error with like you and yourself and your specific grant. My hope is just to show you a bunch of the prompts and some of the ways in which you can use the technology that isn't just like having robot generated Trio grant. That's not what we are trying to do today. So um, first and foremost, why use it in general? So AI is basically a writing assistant. It's not like a full-on replacement. So it's going to help you just through the writer's block. It'll help get like something on a page. I find that most people they love to like edit a paper, but nobody necessarily loves to write a paper. Like it's great to have an opinion on something. So sometimes the AI is good at just helping put something on page so you can suddenly form an opinion around why you don't like that. And then suddenly you realize that like, oh, I actually do have ideas and expertise and like, let me tweak this, change this, or like write something entirely different. But it can sometimes help to just see a version of something so you know maybe why you don't like it and can bring in your own expertise. It also can help edit for just clarity, conciseness. Conciseness gets so difficult with these grants, trying to fit everything we want to say about a project or how we're going to provide these services into the limited amount of space that we realistically have to work with. And then what I'm here to really show you how to do is how to use AI to simulate like external reviews before you even submit it. So like, how do I get feedback just quickly, like section by section, on how I'm addressing what's in the RFP? And you can use this tool for that. And then specifically with Trio, it can be really helpful when interpreting some of like the Department of Ed prompts, or like I said, trimming for like the page limits. They don't necessarily have word limits, but the general rule of thumb is like you're trying to keep it 65 pages or less. So each section has a certain amount of points assigned to it. Just take 65 pages divided by the percentage of points that section is to this grant. That's roughly how much space you want to use writing for that section. So this tool can help you just trim down and prevent duplication within your writing uh, through the edits. And then it's really good at kind of helping maintain a single tone. Maybe you and like your team are working on it. You have somebody in a grants office. You want to just kind of keep a singular voice, whether that is your own or you want it to kind of edit the words you're putting and just have a more formal tone, or something that's going to be phrased specifically for readers. So it can be really good at just kind of creating a singular voice and ensuring that you're not kind of all over the place as you write it over potentially months and months going into this process. So, and then the editing, just asking it to like look at a paragraph and, offer revisions or suggested improvements. Like the basic editing is just a super low hanging fruit, easy way in which that you can use AI tools available to you. So when you're getting started, I kind of wanted to go reverse. Again, I'm kind of talking about everything through the ChatGPT or the Open AI. Obviously, there are free and paid versions. This is pretty critical because the free one, it's good for basic tasks, but you can't upload files. You can't upload images, which sometimes PDFs are not necessarily like if you've ever tried to copy and paste a PDF before, you can't always like pull words off of it because sometimes it's like an image of a page. The paid one can actually like read words even off of an image. The free one, you're not going to get that. And then there's no stored memory. So the beauty of the paid one is like uh, it is a little faster. It's a little more accurate, as they say. You can upload files. You can take the full 100-page RFP, just put it in there, and it can just review it and read it in literally a second and have the context that goes with that when reviewing all the work that you're going to ask it to do. And then part of the reason why it's super helpful is it just has that stored memory. So you can almost just have a single super long chat, and I'll go over some of this stuff in a moment, but it can be one continuous conversation, and you can go back and like look at all of your prior history. It just kind of saves it to a cloud, stored to whatever login is associated with that. Now, I'm less familiar with like Copilot, but if you're on a campus that has a bit more of an upgraded version of one of these AIs, the natural language output prompts, whatever it is, like I highly recommend the one where you can actually upload files. It's just going to make your life so much easier when it comes to like getting expertise out of this versus just generalized suggestion. So how it works, if you're unfamiliar, you just put in prompts. So this is ChatGPT up on the screen now. When I say put in prompts, like you can just ask it questions, tell it to do things. Uh, I'm just going to say, I'm assuming you've seen this before, but I can just ask, what is Trio? The beauty of Trio is we've been around long enough. It's 60 years. A lot of this information is very public. It's in regulations, it's in the law. So it's information that has been on the internet for a really long time. So these platforms are really good at actually understanding what Trio is. As you can see here, it does a really good job of giving us the background. If you want to ask it even more specific things, we can say like, what regulations apply to talent search? And it is going to give you kind of the full breakdown, not only of the Higher Education Act, those are the legs, but also the regs that we are talking about here. Again, it kind of goes into the EDGARs, those CFRs, uniform guidance, APR, GANs, right? Like it it's not always going to be 100% accurate. I'm not saying that, but it definitely knows what it's talking about and can be a very useful tool for us. Okay. So, um, if you have not used these before, you can't ask it to write you a 65-page grant. It's never going to do that, no matter how much you could have $1,000 paid version. Like, don't ask it to do that. You want to break everything into smaller sections. Okay. So if we are looking at, for example, um, this is an example of the RFP the last time around. The beauty with these TRIO grants are like the Higher Education Act is not getting reauthorized. So the majority of what is in these documents coming up for the upcoming competitions is not going to be different than what is in the old one. Okay. So you can find copies of the old one and have it break down information for you. Lost my Okay, so when I say break things down into smaller sections, that's where I'm confused. They're both PDFs. Let's say you are in, this is a beast of a document to read, but if you are writing to the objective section, you're not going to ask it to write the whole objective section. Like you want to really chunk it out for like one particular objective for specific data. Like when you're using it, when you want it to review things, give you ideas, give you edits, everything is going to be in these like very, very, very small little chunks. And then you can always edit that down later because the outputs it's going to give you are going to be relatively big and significant. But you want to always break the content that you're asking about into small sections because it does a really good job of summarizing. So if you ask it for like the whole plan of operation to give you like an outline, it'll do that and that can be pretty helpful, but that's not going to help you in like writing the grant. So you're going to want to like go even service by service of like the required permissible services when you're writing about those in the plan of operation and be like really specific and small in what you're asking it to do. And when you say be specific, like we do mean summarize, rephrase, provide feedback, what are strengths and weaknesses, those sorts of things. And then you don't need to upload any sensitive information. Obviously, we're not talking about student level data when it comes to this stuff. So you can get tons of help without feeling like you're putting anything that is sensitive in here. Like, are they going to steal? Is somebody going to steal my grant if I upload the whole thing and ask for feedback? Um, that's maybe sometimes why it can be helpful to just kind of ask it to go section by section. I would like to think not. I guess I opened a can of worms there. I don't. Theoretically, if you're uploading your entire narrative from the last time you were funded into here, it's kind of in an archive somewhere, but I don't imagine you can just ask it like, hey, give me the copy of every other talent search narrative that's been loaded into ChatGPT. Like, I don't think it's going to give you some master folder with 400 funded proposals. So, um, one helpful tool is that when you're giving it prompts or asking it to do stuff, it can be helpful to like um, ask it to like act as a grant reviewer. I have this screen share thing that's in the way. Here we go. Or identify the strengths and weaknesses. Okay. So as we kind of, again, this is just the getting started thing, but like you can be very specific in what you want it to do. It's not always just going to like write the thing for you. You can kind of have a conversation with the AI and ask it to do very, very specific things. So, um, in terms of the getting started phase and kind of the drafting, here's is a bunch of like samples I wanted to offer up. So you can ask it to create an outline for the objective section of a trio talent search proposal. Like you can just plug that in word for word. I might actually even just do it so we can see what it does. All right, introduction required standard objective. So it's giving us obviously all of the objectives that are in a talent search grant. I don't think it got through all of them. Oh, no, here's the additional ones. Okay. So whether or not you find this useful, I don't know, but you're just trying to get ideas, try to build a structure. If you're not just kind of taking your previous grant and working and editing it, if you really want to try to create something new and creative, You can use this as a tool to just help you outline stuff. You can ask it to write a first draft of the institutional commitment section based on the following notes. And those notes could be word for word what you put in there last time. Now, I had mentioned before the value of like actually uploading documents into ChatGPT. So the full RFP previously. A lot of times what I like to do before I even started asking it question is to just give it proper context. Okay. So I have kind of a bunch of um, examples here. You could even have the legs and regs. Obviously, it like seems to know what those are and where to reference those on the internet. But before I even start asking it questions, I will often like upload the full previous RFP and just tell it exactly what it is. I'm not going to write it all out now because I'd like to be really specific that this was the full request for proposal from the U.S. Department of Education for the talent search competition in 2021. I would like to use this as a template for like a grant that I am writing as I'm writing a proposal this year. You can even attach like your current narrative previously and say, this attachment is the last grant that was funded for this narrative. You're just kind of giving it information and give it background. You don't even have to ask it questions. You can basically tell it like, don't give me any response with this. I just want you to have this as background. So then when you are asking questions, it is referencing not only the full RFP, but also your proposal. And that's why it's important to go section by section so it knows exactly what to look for. I'm looking at plan of operation, this subsection, um, review my previous proposal, and tell me what the strengths and weaknesses are as you see it based on the questions asked in the RFP and the points allotted, right? Like you can kind of get really particular with what it is you're asking it to do. But in terms of just the drafting stage, it can't hurt to just ask it to kind of write an initial draft, if nothing more than just to see things you like, things you don't like. But again, do not just copy and paste that and put it in your section. This is meant to just kind of be the ideation phase of using this. You can ask it to say, what are 5 ways to describe how our program supports low income uh, and first gen students? So just look for ideas. If at any point you feel stuck, like this is a great way to just get a lot of words on a page that you then can start shuffling around, grab chunks from, and integrate into what you are writing in your actual Trio grant. You can ask it to provide suggestions for a plan of operation, how we calculate and how we can address the fill in the blank services, tutoring, academic support, financial literacy, right? Like you can ask for like a very short subsection of how we're addressing a specific service within the grants and just kind of see what those are. Again, I know I could spend time going over and showing tangible examples here, but what's really important is just understanding what are the prompts I need to input and what is some of the work I need to do ahead of time to just make sure that my robot understands the context of what I'm trying to do and has accurate information so that um, I can get really good information on that. I did see is ChatGPT good at doing baseline data research. That is where I will almost always say, like, I wouldn't go there because um, it may give you numbers that it's kind of making up. And you can ask it to like provide your sources, right? Show me where you got that number. So it can't hurt to ask, but do not just copy and paste the number it gives you. I think it can help to be like, hey, for my county, um, can you pull the post-secondary attainment rates or what are the dropout rates for this school district, this county? It's probably going to give you a number every single time. I don't know where that came from or if it's a legitimate source. So you can ask it to then say, can you please provide a link to that number? Or where did you find that information? And you can follow the links because, as Bree said, sometimes they can be dead links, but it can't, like, especially if you're having a hard time doing it through a normal um, avenues if you're having a hard time working the census.gov or like this national state school report card data. Like it's a lot of publicly sourced information. So it is possible it can get you totally legitimate sources that you can use, but I would use it like when you more or less feel stuck versus just obviously copy and pasting. That would be my 2 cents on the data side. Yeah, find me the sources, show me the sources, where do you link the source? Um, so I think show how We got a comment here. Something that Amy found helpful in the needs section is directing it to a table of data and asking it to extract target schools, including directing which should be on the X and Y axis and the data points I want to include. So that's a great point. Even when you like find the information or data, or if it's a whole spreadsheet, let's say you downloaded this huge public data database, like it can kind of like, if you're having a hard time reading this monstrosity of a Excel spreadsheet that was generated from whatever port you're looking at, it can help you narrow down and find the information you are looking for. That's a great point. Does anyone else have, I know there's a bunch of folks in here and it's mostly me talking for 20 straight minutes. Is there any other especially as it relates to more like the drafting phases, and we're on the kind of data side too. Are there any other maybe suggestions that folks have that have used this previously?
Hey Matt, this is Amy. I can chime in on one thing. So I've used it to basically kind of like what you said, assess and assign points to each section of my grant based on previous cycle and give me feedback. So it's given me actual scores for each of my sections, which I found helpful.
Yeah, and I'm almost afraid to do it here now, but somewhere I think in the RFP or like it's publicly available to see the full score. Yeah, here it is, right? So you can see in each and every section, it like breaks down how many points are in each section. So you can, and I think I have slides that touch on that when we ask it to do the review stage. But that is super helpful to have it pretend like it's a Department of Ed reviewer and give you direct feedback. And sometimes it's not going to be useful at all. Um, or it's always gonna suggest weaknesses if you ask it to. It's never gonna be like, no, you're perfect. So you have to have enough clarity and understanding to know which weaknesses you actually need to do address and which ones kind of don't apply given our uh, audience. When it comes to editing, this stuff is kind of the lowest hanging fruit, whether it's grammar, clarity, word counts. Again, we want to emphasize small chunk editing. So like smaller sections. So please proofread the following paragraph for grammar spelling. Like that stuff's pretty easy. People have grammar stuff. Rewrite this paragraph to improve clarity and meet a word limit. We don't necessarily have a word limit, but you kind of have a page limit, and pages have roughly the same amount of words. So if you have some estimate, or you can look online for that too, like roughly how many words fit onto a page. Um, it's got to be double spaced, right? So you can ask it to kind of help you just make things more succinct. It is really good at that, taking the words you've already written and just kind of making them a little tighter and avoiding any kind of duplication that we may have had in a particular section addressing something. You can also use it to check for narrative consistency to avoid jumping between third or first person, sentence variety and transition. If when you're writing 60 pages, you may find that you use certain transition words all of the time, and it might get annoying to somebody reading this over the course of an hour. So it can just help provide slight variations that maybe make it a little easier on the reader and will also help you just address if you're somebody who uses a lot of passive voice or jargon, particularly the passive voice. Speaking of Grammarly, it always flags you like you're speaking in the passive here. And if you're like me, I love to have no squiggly, so I would like to not do that, but that can be difficult at times. Of like, how do you rephrase something? So, um, it very low hanging fruit to just kind of use these AI to do these kind of simple editing tools. In terms of this should say reviewing are cut off, but when you're reviewing with AI, how can you put it in like the funder's lens, right, or Department of Education, and the scoring rubrics? So this is where you can introduce, they call them act as prompts. So you're going to write in there, I want you to act as a Department of Education trio grant reviewer scoring the objectives section. What is missing or unclear? And you can attach a copy of the RFP, even specific scoring rubrics, and then just uh, put your section, either attach that as well, or just copy and paste that text into the prompt and ask it to just what's missing, what's unclear, just kind of get feedback. We're not asking it to rewrite literally anything. We just want an opinion on, you have a rubric here, you have a bunch of very specific questions asking us to address things. How did we do at that? Or here is the grant guidance for SSS or ETS, right? You upload the regulations or a PDF that have those regulations. And then here's a draft of our entire grant, or at least I wouldn't do the whole grant, but this one section of the grant. Can you cross-check it for compliance and make sure that I'm not doing anything that is, obviously illegal? Right now, this has obviously been a huge talking point with the current administration and their elimination of all of the DEI language that was so prevalent in a lot of our grants last time around when we wrote it. Use it to say, or use ChatGPT to kind of review this section and check for DEI language or any kind of language that was identified and prohibited by the Trump administration. You could even attach those kind of letters with their list of things that they're trying to avoid and just use it to help you just like make subtle tweaks and avoid things that potentially could get flagged by this administration, by the Department of Education the next time around when they're reading as kind of almost I would hope they're not just going to throw grants out wholesale, but you better believe they're probably going to tell people to score you very poorly if you're still using a lot of the DEI language that we were encouraged to do last time around. So I think it could be super helpful and just kind of even just check it, like where have I done this, and it'll give you exact citations and quotes in your narrative of where you maybe use those. Um, and obviously, you're encouraged to kind of use your own internal review criteria, reviewer rubrics. So like, um, if you don't want to just rely on what's in the RFP in that section, like this last section of act as Department of Ed reviewer, scoring this section, and you just kind of ask it to review certain things, look for certain things, like just kind of go in circles and circles if you're somebody who's wanting to really make sure you're not missing any elements. All that those important elements that you're trying to address in this work. Use this to have it play different roles for you in your writing. And you can kind of teach ChatGPT to like um, identify and highlight measurable outcomes or like logic model alignment. If you're somebody, those logic models are annoying. They've kind of been a lot of the graphs. So a lot of the grant competitions, if they're asking for one again, it can't hurt to just say, okay, here's an image or like, here is my logic model. Can you ensure that this section is aligned with my logic model? Now tell me about this section, this section. So we're wanting to make sure that there's not any misalignments in the grants, that what we say in one section is then contradicted in the budget or in our logic model and those sorts of things. And then same with, we kind of talked about it before in regards to grant guidance, but just look for gaps in your draft and just ask it to be specific around identifying issues that you may see. So, and kind of my last point here is it's really only going to help you in every way possible to kind of adopt in every kind of phase of your workflow. By workflow, I just mean kind of your process for writing these grants, whether it's the idea phase, draft phase, edit phase, the final review, like every which way that you can find ways to use this tool, it just helps you from ever feeling like you're totally stuck. And if you're stuck, you can tell it like, hey, I'm stuck in this section. You could even ask it like, what should I do to get unstuck? And it'll give you some suggestions as well, but it just kind of creates a constant forward movement and momentum in your work to make sure that you are always kind of generating more ideas, making tweaks, improving whatever it is that you have on paper already. So use it to brainstorm, use it as a team. You can bring AI in obviously as like a third opinion as you and your staff are looking over things. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is incredibly helpful. I use in the work that I do, um, in my work, I use it a ton to help write grants, review grants, but most of mine are like foundations or local organizations, those sorts of things. But it is like a complete game changer. And the entire grant writing industry is like completely, there are entire softwares that are built just for AI grant writing. Like you can pay $100 a month to have software that basically there's a bunch of almost like inputs around your organization, your programs, all those sorts of things. So there's almost like a huge database of information on your organization. And then when you get prompts that, smaller grants and grant foundations are asking you to answer, it can kind of address those having all this background and context on your information already. So if you're at an institution or program that has actual grant writing offices, grant writing staff, you might want to even ask if those are some tools that they have available to them because they may have access to AI tools that are like expensive and far more advanced than even like the paid ChatGPT version or your Copilot that you could potentially utilize. But it is, and at this point, the cat is kind of out of the bag. So if you aren't using it, most of your peers are, particularly in the trio world where it's a bunch of just probably regular folks writing these grants. If you're a director, um, and you just have to do this on top of running a program. So not doing it is going to kind of put you behind the eight ball. Now, you might say you can stand out in certain ways, but from what we've heard from some of the experts who speak to grant writing on a whole scale way, and even folks who have worked as readers for Department of Education before, who are going to be reviewing and scoring your grant, is they almost get used to seeing things a particular way. And if you stand out like too much, even if everything is kind of good on paper, like if you're so different, you could sometimes get penalized points because you're just different and kind of don't fit the standard mold. So, uh, the key is to kind of understand how to use this tool to help you, but not kind of break your proposals, your narratives, not to kind of do things completely and utterly out of compliance and outside of the realm of what Trio actually does and what we're capable of doing. So you definitely still have to bring in your own expertise and kind of use your voice as the final draft. But I think it's super helpful. But does anybody have any questions? I'm excited I finished at like 30 minutes in because I would love to just create space to hear of other people kind of how they've used the tool, or hear any questions, or if there's particular things you want me to maybe do and share screen again and like go through some examples, we could definitely do that as well. But I just want to open things up here.
Hi, Matt. This is Sunny from University of Alaska Anchorage, McNair. I don't use AI a lot, but what I've noticed is the scholars I have in the undergraduate world, they are actually oftentimes encouraged to use AI by their teachers as long as they by the faculty, as long as they self-report it. And so I've started using it here and there, and I typically use Claude.ai. I don't know if I just like the way Claude's always like, "How are you today, Sunny?" And it's like a little bit more of a personalized experience. But I haven't used it in the grant writing process, but in our annual reporting, when we have a few narrative boxes for our programs, not everybody does, but it's particularly for the minority serving institution prompts. I find that it can help me just kind of finesse my language just because my background in math teaching was not in that area. And so then I can match the question to the suggestions Claude gave to what's actually happening in the program and make it into a cohesive 500 word response. So that's just one example.
Yeah, thanks for one of my favorite things to do because when you're in the grant space, whether it's on that, you have a word limit or even on the grants, like your brain gets so caught up in being concise, you sometimes forget that like it's okay to just like put a lot of words on the page, even though you know you're going to have to edit it later. So one of my favorite uses is when it comes to a prompt or, how are you going to do program evaluation, whatever it is, you just can like ramble. You can just write for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Just put every single idea with no structure, no grammar, no syntax, like just ramble, ramble, ramble in your own words as many of your ideas as you can possibly muster. And then you basically ask it, like, okay, those are all of my thoughts on everything that has to do with program evaluation as it relates to this section. Like, can you clean that up? Give me like a concise version of that that's like a page and a half instead of 7 pages long. And it's just going to take your exact words and like organize it in a way that looks like it took like an hour-long meeting to go through and like outline. Like you will often find it's like that is exactly what I was saying, but just like how it sounds in my brain when I picture it, not when I say it. Because when I say it, it comes out all over the place and there's not always a cohesive order or like a beautiful narrative arc to what I'm saying, and it just kind of structures it in a way that is great, but still like very much your voice, your ideas.
No, great point.
Matt, this is Amy. I just chime in on that. Like the organizational aspect that you just described has been very helpful. Not only in thinking about organizing like a section of the grant, but also just things like helping with meeting agendas, helping think about theoretical frameworks that we might want to apply in our grant writing. And it just cuts down the time and the amount of research, because it links, it tells you where the information's coming from, so you can link back and make sure it's a source that you want to use. It's just such to me, a very efficient tool.
Anybody else?
Hi, everybody. I'm just chiming in here to say I've never used AI before, but I'm very impressed with, I am writing my first grant right now and very impressed with the possibilities. I also find it super funny and ironic that half the people in this Zoom appear to be AI note takers, and 4 of them just quit because they're on a different union structure. So I've been laughing about that in the background. But yeah, I'm going to definitely give this a try. I've got a mess of ideas in my grant writing process at the moment, and we'll see what I can do to clean it up.
On a totally side note, but related, I was in a really cool McNair session by a former McNair scholar who does like professional development for McNair scholars and contracts out for that. And I just went to kind of see what she was up to and what she was up doing. And she uses that program Butter, Butter. And she was instead of Zoom. And or the kind of the saying is butter is better. That's their logo. I have to say, when I got the meeting AI summary from her, it was super helpful. It was very streamlined. It was just there in an email, ready to go with the video, with the notes. And so I did really appreciate that. I know that's kind of adjacent to what we're talking about today, but I thought that, sometimes we just get in these habits of using what we've always been using, or using it because the Institute provides a free access point. But that's just a reminder that there's new things popping up every day.
If I could, so there's 4 things I just put in the chat. 2 of them are links to like PDFs of presentations, 2 the subsequent to links that bring you to actual videos. I'm curious, if somebody clicks on one of those screencast videos, are you actually able to view those recordings, or are those kind of locked in some way, shape, or form?
It started playing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Grant Station, if you're unfamiliar with it, this is more like the grants world. It's this massive platform of like, how do you find opportunities? So folks at all foundations, local organizations, whatever. It's just this huge database of like, where do you actually go to find grants? So this is probably what grant offices use all the time. All kinds of nonprofits. Like Oregon Trail Association is a member of them too, but they have a bunch of like professional development and kind of free support services. So this was something I want to say was like probably 2013 or maybe early 2024. I'd mentioned earlier, this whole series of how to integrate ChatGPT and just AI software. Part of what I presented on today is using some of like the tools that I learned on here. But if you're interested in watching those recordings, they have a lot more actual like full prompts and examples that they'll go through. And again, they're doing it more in like the small foundation grant world. So like they're much more like whimsical narrative stuff versus our like technical government based trio grant. So it's not a 1-for-1, but they show you in a little more examples. You have the PDFs to go on to, just examples of those prompts, kind of like we covered today, and just how they utilize the AI in everything that we talked about. So if you're wanting a few more examples or just some other resources, I found those really helpful. And I do think there's a lot of it that can apply to what it is we do. So, I mean, there's lots of conversations to be had around how much we use this in all the different aspects of the work that we do. But specifically, I do think there's a lot of potential as it relates to the TRIO grants, especially if you are that, there's been a decent amount of turnover. That just seems to be the general vibe. So for those of you who have not done it before, like it can just make it feel like you have an expert on your side. So any final questions here? I don't really have anything else unless people have something specific they want to go over. Okay. I'm gonna the recording goes up on the NAEOP site as well as like the slides I share, but I'll probably also share the those other resources I threw in the chat there as well. So if at any point you're like, man, I wish I could get my hands on the thing Matt said, like it'll all be kind of housed on that NAEOP, like under the PD tabs. So just look for it there. If you want to send it to any other staff, they can look for it there. But thank you all for being here, and hopefully you found this helpful. So with that, I'm gonna stop our recording and call it a day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Matt.